Professor Tapan Kumar Panda is currently holding the leadership role of one of the premier most management institute in India, NMIMS Hyderabad, as director. He is an alumnus of University of Houston, USA, where he completed an MBA in global energy. He holds a PhD in business administration. He has worked as a full-time faculty member at 3 IIMs like Lucknow, Kozhikode, and Indore. Prior to his joining NMIMS, he was working as a chief academic officer at Ampersand Grove, Mumbai. He has also officiated as director Indian Institute of Management Indore before joining Everon Educational Limited, a BSc and NSc listed company, as its president, marketing and corporate affairs. He has more than 20 years of academic experience in marketing, branding and customer relationship management. He was also director at Great Lakes Institute of Management, Chennai. He has visited City Pure College, University of Houston, Texas, USA, University of Cincinnati, Ohio, USA, Fudan University, Shanghai, China, on visiting academic assignments. He has trained people from reputed organizations like ONGC, KALE, SAIL, EIL, HUL, LG, Axis Bank, and TVS Motors. He is a member of American Marketing Association, AMA, National Board of Accreditation, NBA, and AIMA. He has published extensively in reputed national and international journals and presented in international conferences across the world. He has more than 50 research papers and 16 books to his credit. His books include Sales and Distribution Management by Oxford University Press, Marketing Management by Excel Books, Tourism Management by Orient Longman. He is a regular contributor to business newspapers and magazines and has participated in CNBC and G Business programs. With this brief introduction, I welcome you once again, sir, and request you to continue the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Himanshu. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, sir. It is audible, sir.
Okay. Thank you for this nice introduction. I hope my wife listens to this. She'll feel very happy that I have been able to do something in life. No, that was the idea. Welcome to all the participants who are present here. And I just saw the note that I'm the last speaker before the program is being concluded and the vice chancellor comes into the event. That is what I can read out from the schedule which is given to me. So I understand that I am speaking to a very learned audience now, particularly when the program started. And today when the program is coming to a conclusion, in between they must have gathered a lot of knowledge and information. And that makes my job more challenging because I'm pretty sure that the professors, I have seen the list of speakers and professors who have spoken. They must have given you a lot of ideas about tourism and tourism promotion, but it will be a good idea, Himanshu, to know the kind of audience you have got here. Are they all faculty members of different schools, or they're entrepreneurs, or what kind of people are there who are participating in this program?
Sir, most of the participants are the faculty members in different capacities as assistant professor, associate professor, and professors from tourism, hospitality, as well as business management, and very few students from research scholars and PG students are there.
Okay, so basically I'm addressing to academicians.
Yes, sir.
And then the topic you have given me is for businessmen. The topic is about funding agencies for tourism and hospitality business ventures in India.
Yes.
That's a topic that we're going to talk about. I understand the logic behind putting this topic is because today when we look back to the students of tourism or management, or for that matter, the focus has been how they can become entrepreneurs by themselves and how they can become job creators than looking for the jobs or being the job seekers. That's a great idea to have, where the focus is more on creating more of the job creators and the job seekers. So maybe some 10, 15 years before, or maybe some 5 years before, when we are running a program, Essentially, your objective of running that program, Master of Tourism or Bachelor of Tourism program, is to really create manpower for the industry. And since the industry has matured over a period of time, what is essentially required at this point of time is to create entrepreneurs, those who can create new ventures. And if you can create these entrepreneurs and new ventures, they will create more jobs. That's how it happens there. So there was a session before me where there has been some talk on entrepreneurship. So before I jump into funding agencies and the kind of funding which is required for starting any startup, for that matter, tourism startup in that sense there, we have to look at the whole idea of business. I'll start from the whole idea of business. Now, all the books that you have studied or you are teaching to your students, they have spoken about that always you look for an opportunity. So an entrepreneur comes to solve a problem. Entrepreneur comes to solve a business problem. Like a researcher comes to solve a conceptual problem. An entrepreneur comes to solve a business problem. So if the entrepreneur has an understanding of the problem and he has got a business idea, then obviously a mentor or an accelerator will work on that and try to build up as a business model. And then he's looking for funding. Like everybody has got a life cycle from embryonic stage to your death. Similarly, organizations have their life cycles also. So funding agencies come at each stage of the life cycles. I'll come back to that conversation later on when we come for that discussion there. But prior to that, let's look at what exactly do you think that an entrepreneur solves as a problem in hospitality industry, but even if it is not hospitality industry, any industry for that matter. What are those problems that the entrepreneur solves? I guess you have something called a chat box. I guess all of you can go to the chat box and you can write down your opinion about what does an entrepreneur do. I'm waiting for your answers. Please go to the chat box and type your answer. What does an entrepreneur do? Very good. Sri Ranjan Menon says that an entrepreneur solves the social problems. An entrepreneur creates employment by Mohini Rachel. And Dhananjay talks about new idea into existence. Carry on, please carry on. I would like to have your ideas. Most of the times when I speak here, I make it more interactive. I involve the teachers on the other side, get ideas from that, have a conversations and do that part. And since you have a chat facility available here and there are 114 participants, it shows there are 114 participants, we can have questions in between which you would have otherwise done in a classroom setup. When you go to a classroom setup and I am standing in front of you and we are talking about having a conversation on any subject, then we discuss on that part of it. Rohit writes that it is about changing dreams, making them possible. Entrepreneurs can develop economy by Charulata, take risk, and he has a quality of perseverance. He can explore new paradigm of society and nation, make things are easy. Great, great, very good ideas I'm getting here. Entrepreneur finds the requirements of the society and designs a product to fulfill the needs. Innovation and more employment generation. Vishwanath says that it is about starting a new venture, do innovation and make profit. So roughly what I have understood is that you have identified the role of an entrepreneur. What does an entrepreneur, what kind of role an entrepreneur does? The role of the entrepreneur is to start a venture. The role of the entrepreneur is to innovate. The role of the entrepreneur is to do something whereby profit is being generated. In fact, we don't look at profit as a sole goal of an enterprise, right? Because the idea of profit is spread across different dimensions in that case. So that is why we cannot say that profit should be the primary goal of a business, because business has also a corporate entity and they also have other functions or other goals to achieve. But in the process of doing that, why you make profits there? In capitalistic economic system, you call an invisible hand. So profit becomes an invisible hand for you, right? It is an invisible hand. Profit is an invisible hand for you, and then you contribute. The efficiency comes out of the systems there, right? So if that is what an entrepreneur has to do, if that is what somebody who starts a business has to do, he need to solve some problem, right? So this is what the roles they play there, right? Doing an innovation, making profit, starting a venture. So what are those problems which exist? And if an entrepreneur can solve a problem, an existing problem, that becomes an opportunity for that person there, right? Better use of resources is one of the points which are coming there. So what are those problems that exist that transfers itself into the concept of an opportunity is what we have to look at, right? That's what is there. What do you think? What kind of problems are there that creates an opportunity for an entrepreneur? What problem is that? What is the business problem that an entrepreneur tries to solve? Answers, please. Answers, please. What is the business problem that entrepreneur solves? For example, if I ask this question to a business student, the business student will come and answer there is a demand supply gap. If there's a demand supply gap, in that case, the entrepreneur tries to increase the demand levels by marketing activities and increases the supply levels by doing productions there and connects the value chain, connects both the ends of the market, and business comes out of that. Is there any other idea that you have got? What kind of problem do you think an entrepreneur solves there? Problems of unemployment is what Neetu is writing. Economic and social development, optimum use of resources, promotion of the product, fulfill consumer needs and desires, repositioning of the need. I really understand what exactly is repositioning of the need mean here in that case. Anyway, it's a great idea to look at. Capital investment, it is not necessary that the entrepreneur invests always. If you have a great idea, there are investors who are there who are moving with a box of money, and then you go and get an opportunity, they will invest on your business. Support from government, problem solution interface, finding the existing gap in the market. Vaibhav is writing this. Comprehend the customer need, reduce cost. Great points. I think we are getting great points. Create a competitive advantage, affiliation, certification. Mohammed Halim is writing about that part of it. Now let's look at all these answers and revisit my question. My question was how exactly a problem in the marketplace becomes an opportunity for an entrepreneur. So for that, you need to understand what problems are there. Structurally, when you look at a business or a market, there are essentially two types of problems, right? The first kind of problem is called market dysfunctionality problem, right? So there is a functional dysfunctionality in the marketplace. An entrepreneur tries to solve this dysfunctionality, right? So when he tries or builds a solution for dysfunctionality, that becomes a business solution for him, right? So on one dimension of that is dysfunctionality in the marketplace. Now, how do we really understand this idea of dysfunctionality? Now, that is important for us to understand the idea of dysfunctionality. If you look at these development countries, for example, Africa or all other countries you have got there, I don't know what happened to the screen. I hope things are fine, Himanshu.
Sir.
I just got a screen, so it's fine. You can see me and.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Something else. Something else. Okay. So let's look at the globe itself and try to divide the globe as a spectrum. You understand spectrum? So most of you, when you look at a spectrum, somebody's writing not
excuse
visible.
Me, sir. The screen is there, but the PPT is not there, sir.
I don't run a PPT. I'm not running any PPT.
But there is no picture. It's a white screen only, sir.
It says Anuradha Padwal's screen. I don't know who is Anuradha Padwal. Is that the singer? Anuradha Padwal? But what the singer has to do in our session?
She's attending the program, sir. But how?
It's a participant? Is it a participant's name?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, I thought the singer. So we have somebody in the same name like the singer's name, no? Okay.
Yes.
So then thank you. In that case, I don't use a PPT. I'll be doing a conversation with my audience, asking them questions in between, and then taking the conversation forward. I don't enjoy running a structured PPT because it all depends on what kind of questions the audience asks me. The flow will go in that direction. I'm open to questions now. So you can chat with me by answering to my questions, as well as you can also put questions to me in that case. If the concepts that I am talking about or the discussions or the conversation I'm having, if you have any doubts, you can put your questions to me in that case, right? That was the format which I'll prefer to work at this point of time. So let me come back to the conversation that we have got. So we thought that we will put countries into buckets first, but looking into last 30, 40, 100 years of development, we cannot make countries into buckets there. There have to be a spectrum, a continuity of the nations in that case. Let me give you a macro view. Helicopter view is what it is called there. I know everybody talks about Dhoni's helicopter shot, but in management also you can take helicopter view. So this is like a helicopter view. So let us take an helicopter view there. I hope many of you must have heard about Robert Malthus, particularly all those who have studied economics. They know what is Robert Malthus, and there is something called the Malthusian trap, right? So how many of you are hearing Robert Malthus for the first time? If you are hearing for the first time, you can say first time, others can say you have heard about him, right? So Himanshu, in some way I can allow some people to come speak, or it will be just one way of me talking to them and getting opinion
You can
from the chat. What is the
you, you can ask them to talk, sir. But before that, I have to again unmute all.
Okay, okay. Don't worry about that part. Don't worry. If it is required, we'll do it. Otherwise, my
Yes.
interactions can be over chat also. Chat is fine. We can
Thank,
do on the chat. They can type on the
thank,
chat and do that part. So I can see that
thank.
many of you are writing first time. So I think that after my session finishes, you please go back and Google about Robert Malthus and understand what is Malthusian trap. So this is an essay that Robert Malthus wrote in the 18th century, 1790 or sometime. He wrote a case. He wrote an essay called Robert Malthus, and he talked about a trap called Malthusian trap. So all the nations before certain thousand number of years before, right, that all of them are at the same level. But something happened in the 16th century that made some of these nations to really grow and some of these nations not to grow there. I can see Dr. Ranjit is writing Malthusianism is the idea that population growth is potentially exponential while the growth of the food supply or other resources is linear. These are the consequences we got in that case when he talks about how do you balance growth. So he says that, okay, one population, one couple can produce 4, 6, 8 children, but a land cannot really produce 4 times or 5 times. It can only produce at a certain levels. And Robert Malthus had this argument that war is good for the society, plague is good for the society. You'll read those kind of interesting stuff which comes there, whereby he says that it is important for people to die in the war. It's important for people to really go and die in other activities like plagues and other diseases which are there. So there is a balance. That's one of the ideas of Robert Malthus. But I'm talking about Malthusian trap. So in the Malthusian trap, Robert Malthus says that all the nations were equally rich or equally poor. Only in the 16th century, something happened in the Europe, particularly in the island Europe, which is Great Britain. Don't say that this is industrial evolution, for which certain number of countries really went ahead and they became great nations, and somebody followed back. For example, two countries, UK and Poland, were very similar at the same situation, but over 100 years of time, it was found out that somebody has really grown up and some country had stayed back. Rohit writes about Inferno, Dan Brown's Inferno. I think Inferno has to do with a virus. I have seen the movie. It has to do with virus. But plague is one of those things which he says that you need to control the exponential growth of populations, for which there has to be a control. But that's something outside our conversations. I will request all of you to read about Robert Malthus. Very interesting thought process which are there. So some nations grew and they become very successful in that case. So today, when you look back to the whole world, you can create a continuum or a spectrum and keep nations in that cycle. For example, on one side, you have countries called least development countries. On the extreme, you have got developed countries. So US, Australia, England, all of them are Europe, some of the European leading European nations can be called developed nations. And in between are emerging markets. India, China, Brazil, Russia, all of them are becoming emerging markets there. So this is how the world is being taken as a continuum there. So once we say that it is in a continuum, it is natural that what formula of entrepreneurship that works in a least development country, the same formula is not going to work for a developed nation. The same formula is not going to work for developing nations. That means that there is different kind of ideas, different kind of things that will come between one to the other one, right? So that is where the question comes there. So why we call some countries that developed nations, and why? Let us look into the second answer. Why we call some countries that developed nations, and why some countries we call as least development countries, right? So some of the economics professors present here, they understand what we call as factors of production. That comes from the economic side. So these are the countries which have been able to utilize the factors of production and have built up a system, very robust system in that case. So we define that something called market functionality. That means the market functions properly. What does that mean? That if the market players don't perform properly, there is a market dysfunctionality. I can give an example. A farmer in India sells his output, agricultural output, at a distressed price at the time of his harvesting. That is being taken care by a distribution channel, government public distribution system. And then the prices in the marketplace is higher. So there is some level of market dysfunctionality as far as agricultural product movement is concerned in India, right? So as a result of that, the benefit that the nation should get, the benefit that the producer should get, the benefit that the consumer should get, that benefit I hope you can hear me. So that benefit doesn't get transferred to the system there, right? So that creates voids. So there are voids in the system. If you look at a developed market, like US, the voids are minimum. When you look at the least development countries, the voids are institutional voids are quite a bit more. When you look at emerging markets, the voids exist there. There are voids which exist there. For example, access and distribution channel, access to the market, access to the capital. If you look that part, capital is really, really dry in these areas. Capital is available quite a lot because our conversation is about funding agencies. So capital is available more for the United Nations or United States or for the developed nations. So so there is sorry so there is some level of market dysfunctionality that exists. If an entrepreneur can solve the problem of market dysfunctionality, then he can build a business model. I'll give you a few examples for you to understand. I'll give you these examples in the context of business as well as in the context of social business, because some of you have responded to me saying that there is something called social business and social responsibilities. That's why I'll give you an example of that part of it. So you look at how people are buying airline tickets in the past. They will go to an agent. Agent will charge a service fee, and that service fee is something that is added on to the fee that you pay for your flying. And there are few number of planes, few people can really afford to fly at that point of time. So you can find out there was a dysfunctionality in the marketplace. So makemytrip.com in India or ctrip.com in China, they came into the picture, and both of them took the benefit of internet revolution and created business models out of it. For your information, internet is not meant for business. Internet is basically meant for information. When internet was created by the defense organizations in US, it was to pass real-time information. What we have done is we have created e-commerce models out of a platform which is supposed to disseminate information. Now for doing that part, we have added a lot of things into that, right? We have added a lot of features. For example, you have added online transactions, you have added online security systems. So you have added all that part. Now that solves the problem of a market. So there was an existence of a problem, and then that problem has been solved by using an e-commerce platform like Make My Trip in India or by Ctrip in China. They solve these problems there. For example, Oyo also solves a problem. It's an aggregator that brings the owners of the rooms, that brings the consumers into one platform, connects them together and builds a business model. That's what we call as how do you really go and solve the problems in the marketplace. You must be wondering why I'm giving tech enabled examples. Can I give something which is non-tech enabled example? There are non-tech enabled, non-tech related examples also. I'll give you one interesting example, right? So a 63-year-old man, after his retirement as a doctor, does an estimation of how many people in India suffer from cataract problem, the eye problem, the cataract problem. He tries to do a study. Then he finds out there is a big challenge on cataract surgery in India. Blindness is a big problem in our society. He goes back, he analyzes that how many doctors do you really need, ophthalmologists and doctors do you really need to solve the cataract problem of our society, Indian society. I hope you understand that this is what is called a market dysfunctionality. And from that, he develops a new business model. It is called a cross-subsidized business model. So he understands that a large number of people cannot afford a cataract surgery because expenses of the surgery is very high. But there are certain number of people they can afford and they can pay money for cataract surgery. So he creates Arvind Eye Hospital. And by creating Arvind Eye Hospital, he provides paid services to people who can afford. And then there are people who are subsidized for doing the surgeries. He goes further. He analyzes the whole operation process. In our management terms, we call that as a value chain. He analyzes from the operation process that when a patient walks in and then the surgery is over and the patient is correct, the total time that a doctor is involved in conducting a surgery is only 5 minutes. The rest of the activities are being done by non-medicals. So then he decides to create a conveyor belt. And in the conveyor belt, all these medicos and non-medicos stand. And then one medico does a patient for only 5 minutes and that patient goes out. And then the next patient comes in. Maybe the patient has entered into the process, the conveyor belt process. This is not a typical conveyor belt like manufacturing conveyor belt, but the philosophy remains the same. So all other people are making it. He is an expert who only does one part of the job, the surgery part of it. And by doing this, he identified that it will take 90 years to solve the cataract problem of India. So he goes and identifies a dysfunctionality in the marketplace and tries to solve it by a cross-subsidized model, which is like a social business model. So I gave you examples of for-profit models and not-for-profit models there, right? So basic job from one dimension is to solve the problem of market dysfunctionality. Okay, hybrid business models. Okay, I'll explain, Doctor. I'll explain what it is. Let me take a pause and answer to this question. So when you look at businesses are being done in various ways. So there are some businesses which we call as social businesses, right? So if you look at social businesses can be done in three ways. I'll give you examples of that. Mr. Bankar Rai, who was an IS officer, he goes to a place called Tilonia and he creates a college called Barefoot College. As a principal, he decides that he is not going to give a degree to the students. What he intends to give is skill to the students. You know, many of our engineering students, they get degrees, but they lack on the skills which they have got. So he decides to give the skill. So and he creates automobile engineers, he creates refrigeration engineers, he creates those kind of people. But the business model is somebody donates him and then he runs the business. So the objective is not to make the profit. The objective is to do an entirely social exercise by creating desired manpower for our society. I hope you can hear me. This is a question which is asked by Dr. Ranjit, which I am answering now. Okay. And the second kind of business model is Arvind Eye Hospital's model, which is like some people who can afford, they pay, and some people who cannot afford, they will not pay for that part. So it's a cross subsidization model. And the third model is Amul model, whereby you can see how the farmers cooperative was built. and how people can come there. So the primary objective of running a business like this, where you solve the market dysfunctionality problem through a cooperative institution building, is to make profits. At no point of time, Amul wanted to lose money for doing social benefits. But in the process of making profit, they also provide employment to people. They also provide opportunity for cow breeding, opportunity for research on veterinary science so that better breeds can be created, creating institutions and organizations that can do the milk processing part of it. The objective of this enterprise is to make profits, and large part of that profit is being plowed back. So I have explained you the concept of a hybrid business model. In a typical management sense, a hybrid business model can be at the extreme end, can go for only social business or only profit business, or in between can be a subsidized model, cross subsidization model. This is the power that people have got there. That was the idea of a hybridized model where social objectives and economic objectives can coexist. There are many examples which I can give you about these hybrid business models where both of these objectives can work together, because both of them are intended to solve some kind of a market dysfunctionality there. So one of the problem that an entrepreneur solves is a market dysfunctionality problem. So in India, there are people who are there distributed small-time craftsmen. They do some kind of crafts. They're not organized. They don't have power, buying, purchasing power or buying power. So the trade takes over that craft. Craftsman's skill pays him very low. The margins of the trade is higher, and the consumer pays higher. There comes my student, two of my ex-students who worked with me 5-7 years before we started working on this, and we create a platform called Craftsvilla. And on this platform of Craftsvilla, on one side, we bring these traders or the craftsmen. On the other side, we bring the consumers on the other side. And then we try to bring them together so that there is something called a price discovery. So the farmer and the craftsman can do the price discoveries, what is the real price for his product, and the consumer can also get the price discovery. And this process is called disintermediation process. So there are intermediaries. By using technology, you remove the intermediaries, do a disintermediation process, connect the creator or producer with the marketplace, and then everybody is getting benefit by that process. This is one way of disintermediation, is one way of solving the problem that exists in the marketplace. I will come back further. Let's look at the second part of what does an entrepreneur do. So I'm pretty sure now that you know that as an entrepreneur, what should you look at? As an entrepreneur, you should always look at what is the market dysfunctionality that exists, and you try to solve that market dysfunctionality. Now, let me give you a lighter example. Right? It's a lighter example because there's a novel which is written as a part of my new venture course. I teach this course there. This book is called The Monk and the Riddle. The book is called The Monk and the Riddle. Very popular book in the business schools, Monk and the Riddle. So when you read this book, this is about a man. He's an investment banker, because I'll be coming to investment banking at a later part of my conversation. So he's an investment banker. You understand what an investment banker does. An investment banker does a basic job. He sits down, he evaluates different kind of business ideas by entrepreneurs, and then he decides where he will invest. An investment banker, when he invests money, he invests in 10 projects, right? And out of the 10 projects, not necessarily that all 10 of them will work out. But if 4 of them work out, he covers all the investments he has made in all the 10 projects that he has got there. These investment bankers, they come at different stages of their life. It is like your life. Like you get a girlfriend, you get a wife, you get a mother of your child. So the investment bankers come in that way. At the early stage, they come in the form of an angel investor. I'm one of the angel investors. I normally, when I do a consulting, I charge a consulting fee. But when somebody comes with a startup to me, I take an equity in that company. I mentor that student, give access to capital. And whenever the business grows bigger, then I come out. So if I've invested 5 rupees, I come out at 15 rupees. This is an angel investor's job. So your job is not to just put money, but also to guide the business and try to get these startups, mostly teach them what not to do than what to do in that case, right? I hope you are able to hear me, because sometimes I get confused with.
You are very much audible, sir.
Okay, Sometimes because people go to sleep, so I find out whether they're listening to me or not. So it will be good idea if somebody can wake everyone up. But let me complete this story. So this guy goes and he is in Bay Area. There are two areas where you can get private equity players. So yes, I was talking about the continuum of investments, funding agencies. So one of them is called an angel investor. After 3 to 4 years of your business, where your business model matures and you're looking for a scale up, you look for people who are called private equity players. So then you get private equity players, the pure play business players. They come on investment at X and they would like to get a 3x return in the process. That's the private equity players who come there. At some point of time, you take this to the marketplace, you get an IPO done, so you get public involved into your business. And at some point of time in the future period of time, you get qualified institutional investors. They come and invest in your business. So there are different kind of funding people who are involved in a business there. On one extreme, you have got angel investors who trust your ideas, rely on you, guide you, mentor you. Then you have got private equity players who come there when you're scaling up your business. And then you have access to public capital and institutional capitals to make your business, particularly that happens when you mature your business. So there are various players. That's the title. You have funding agencies, different types of funding people who are there in the business. Let me go back to this guy I'm talking about. So this guy is sitting there, and everybody knows, all startup people, they know, all young boys, they know that if he says yes to your business idea, there are other investors, those who will invest in the money there. So there are people like this. If you do a reco and you have invested, people, those who trust you, they will also come and they will invest on your business. That's a kind of a model that works on investment platform. It's a hard model, HERD, hard model, but that works. Most of the people, it operates in that way. So this guy goes and meets this person, the investor who is sipping coffee in a restaurant. He doesn't have office. He sips coffee and listens to the great ideas. So this young boy walks in and he says that, sir, I want to start a business. This is great. What kind of business will that be? So he says that, sir, I want to start a website called www.funerals.com. He says, what does that funeral mean? He says that a funeral means, sir, people will die. When they die, they need a priest. When they die, they need a coffin. They die, they have to book a place. They die, they need mourners, people, those who will come and mourn about the death. And they need to create an event so that the event can be managed. So there is something, some business that happens there, right? So, so this is an opportunity whereby there is no player who manages the funerals. Funerals are mostly managed by the churches, but if you are going to a church also, you have to go to the market and buy a coffin from there, buy a suit from there, call people there. So instead of doing it, I will solve that problem. So there's a market dysfunctionality. Here is an opportunity. I'll solve this problem. So he said, this is what I will start it. So this book talks about the conversation between the investor, likely investor, and this young startup owner, the entrepreneur. They have these conversations there. And then during these conversations, the puzzle comes, the riddle comes, where the investor says to this young man, if you have to throw an egg, how do you really ensure that the egg doesn't break till 3 feet? And then this investor says that he was in Myanmar. Myanmar is very close to India. And he was waiting in a tea stall. And then he saw a monk who was driving a bike, a motorcycle. So he asked for a lift to the monk. That's why the title of the book is called The Monk and the Riddle. Very, very powerful book to read on entrepreneurship and venture planning. And when they were traveling together, the monk was driving in the motorcycle and this fellow was riding there.
You are now
Yes,
unmuted, sir.
yeah, it's on mute now. I just asked a question. How many people have read this book, Monk and the Riddle? You can always answer yes, no, yes, no.
শক্তিক হচ্ছে এফএনবি সার্ভিস আর ফ্রন্ট অফিসের ক্লাস নেবে। সার্ভিস নেবে হচ্ছে 23 তারিখ, মানে হচ্ছে বুধবার, কটা 9:30 থেকে 10:30। ঠিক আছে। আর শক্তিক সেকেন্ড ইয়ারের फ्रंट ऑफिस क्लास में बैठे
Excuse me, participants. Excuse me. Kindly maintain silence because sir is going to ask you some questions. You have to answer.
స్కిల్డ్ వర్కర్స్ కి సేమ్ స్కిల్ వర్కర్స్ కి ఎక్కువగా డిఫరెన్స్ ఉంటుంది. సో పర్చేసింగ్ డిపార్ట్మెంట్, క్యాషియర్, రిసీప్ట్స్, క్లర్క్స్. ఇక్కడ సేమ్ స్కిల్ అయితే స్టెనోగ్రాఫర్, టైపిస్ట్, మెషిన్ ఆపరేటర్స్ ఎక్సెట్రా. How you will differentiate?
তা কোন ইয়ারে দেবেন একটু বলে দিন, আমার সুবিধা হবে। ফার্স্ট ইয়ার না থার্ড ইয়ার? অর্ধকে কোন ইয়ারে দেবেন?
So that is the reason why this classification.
Dear participants, are you audible?
మరి ఎంత సబ్జెక్టు కావాలి అని చెప్పుకున్నా
বুধবার লাস্টের ক্লাসটা আমার আছে, আমি দিয়ে দিচ্ছি। সরি, বুধবার বলছি না, বুধবার
हाथ का कर रहा है,
हाथ का कर रहा है।
মঙ্গলবার স্যার সেকেন্ড হাফে দেবো। মঙ্গলবার তো আমাদের কারোরই নেই, 22 তারিখ। ও তো এখানেই থাকবে বোধহয়, কলেজেই থাকবে, এখান থেকেই ক্লাস নিতে পারবে।
Also, can you
মঙ্গলবার সেকেন্ড হাফে লাস্টের ক্লাসটা দিয়ে দিচ্ছি, 3টা থেকে 4টে।
Hello, Kaustubh, can you please stop your phone?
বলুন, আপনি যা বলবেন। তাহলে বৃহস্পতিবার, শুক্রবার, তাহলে বৃহস্পতিবার দিয়ে দিচ্ছি।
I don't handle the voice part. Mansu, can you do something at your end so that you can mute everyone?
Okay.
Should I mute everyone?
हमें से
अच्छा ला देंगे मेरा बेटा, ला देंगे मेरा बेटा, अभी ला देंगे।
Something happened in between.
So now it's okay. You
Can I continue now, or people
Yes,
want
sir.
to have small things?
Sir, actually, as per your instruction, I have unmuted everyone, and
No, I
that's why
didn't
it was
say
disturbed.
that. I said chat is fine with me. I said chat is fine with me. You don't have to
Okay, okay.
unmute everyone because I can hear children's voice and I can hear Kaustubh talking on phone.
Uh-huh.
So Kaustubh is doubling up over phone as well as listening to me, or he is not listening at all. Yeah, I understand. People are saying that the flow is broken. Now the flow is broken, but don't worry, I'll bring back. I'll bring back. Please mute.
Sure.
If you don't wish to listen to me, then in that case you can just mute and go out. I'm not interested on those who don't listen. But if all those who are listening, they should not be disturbed, right? And I should not be disturbed because I told Himanshu that I'm just killing some other meetings for this slot and have a conversation in that way. So please either you listen to me or don't listen to me at all. If you listen to me, then you can participate in the chat that I am doing and sending. And I can see that some of my colleagues and friends are also listening to me. I can see their names coming on screen there. They're also professors. So please don't do that part. Okay. You posted on chat. Please only use chat, nothing else, because I'm going to ask you questions on chat in that case. Let's go back to the book that I talked about, the Monk and the Riddle book that I was talking about. I was talking about this young boy who walks in, and the young boy says that he wants to create a website called www.funerals.com. And if you go towards the end of this conversation in the book, I'll cut the book short. Finally, they come back and they say that it's called www.circleoflife.com. And later on, that became doublelife.com. No? Some of you must have got a Double Life account and you are using Double Life account in that case. So this is an example of how a pure play funding guy interacts with an entrepreneur and mentors and coaches that entrepreneur, so that that basic idea of providing services only to a funeral ends up becoming a larger business plan. I think you as a teacher, mentor, and when you are promoting this entrepreneurship among your students, or you are creating an entrepreneurship culture beyond the windows of your office, you should always try to do that part, right? So I'm finishing the first part. The first part of what an entrepreneur does is try to solve market dysfunctionality. That's one side of the story. The other side of the story, what else he does is there is a huge amount of information asymmetry, right? The second part is called information asymmetry. And what does an entrepreneur do? He tries to kill this idea of information asymmetry and connects both consumer and the user. In the retail context, when you look at Flipkart or you look at others, that's what we call as from the farm where it is being produced to the fork where it is being eaten there, right? So there are two issues that an entrepreneur solves. One part is called market dysfunctionality. The other part is called information asymmetry. What do you mean by information asymmetry? Can you please go back to the chat and type your understanding of information asymmetry so that I can go back and give you some examples of information asymmetry. What exactly is information asymmetry? I'm waiting for your chat. Please go to the chat and type. Don't Google. I know Google will give you right answer, but your understanding of what exactly is. What do you mean by information asymmetry? I can see Divya's answer, Anil Gupta's answer. Yes, I understand what you are trying to say. So Anil is giving a very good point. Anil says equal access to quantity and quality of information. Equal access to whom? Equal access to every member of the value chain, right? Equal access to every member of the value chain. Now, you must have heard about something called blockchain, very recently being talked about. It's called blockchain. What exactly is a blockchain? Blockchain is something that provides equal access of information and transaction to every member of the value chain. What is internet to information? Blockchain is to transaction. In business, we do transactions. So if internet is providing information, blockchain is providing transactions. What exactly that means in a blockchain? So if you see a farmer or a producer, whether in India or abroad, a farmer or a producer maintains his own record. If the goods are moving to somebody who is managing the logistic, then in that case, he is maintaining a record. When the goods go to the manufacturer, he keeps a record. It goes to the retailer, he keeps a record. And finally, consumer, he keeps a record there, right? So in each of these cases, people have their own ledgers. I call that as a ledger, each of their ledgers. And there is a discrepancy of ledger from one to the other one to the other one. That brings opacity to the business. You understand opacity, non-transparency into the business there. Now somebody comes and tries to solve this problem by bringing the idea of a blockchain. So blockchain is an open ledger. So when the product moves from the producer side till it reaches to the final player for consumption, blockchain provides all transaction informations by creating an open ledger, right? So that is what you call it. Cannot it is not only inaccurate information, Srinivas, it's also the quantity of information. Sometimes hiding the information helps you in the marketplace. You have seen this in the stock market. The stock market people will go and provide a different kind of information which is likely to influence the decision making of the investors. They hide the information, they put a layering in the information. So there exists huge amount of information asymmetry. If you go to Coimbatore and you are buying tomatoes, you buy tomatoes there whereby the price will be 2 rupees kilo. And when you come to Mumbai and you want to buy the same tomato, the price will be 16 rupees a kilo. The consumer doesn't know that the price of tomato in Coimbatore is 2 rupees, or the farmer in Coimbatore doesn't know that the price of the tomato is 16 rupees in Mumbai. The trade has that information, and the trade does more margin. The trade exploits the consumer, and the trade does more margin, and the farmer exploits the farmer on both sides. That is what it happens there. When you say symmetry, symmetry is like a normal distribution or a bell-shaped curve. So when you say information asymmetry, it is skewed to one side or it is skewed to the other side. If that is the case, wherever it is skewed towards, that's the benefit of the person. The skew to the opposite side is losing and the other side is gaining. Let me look at it in that way. Yes, it is like not only hiding the information, but how you are presenting that information, right? So somebody comes in between, tries to do something and tries to solve this problem of information asymmetry, and here is a business opportunity for him. I'll give you an example. When I was working in IIM Indore, I was thrown a challenge. There are different kind of wheat mandis, gehu mandi markets. The prices in the gehu mandis were different from one another. If you look at the price available in Indore market or Ujjain market of the same kind of wheat, and when you look at that price in Jabalpur or some other price, the prices were different. I understand there is a procurement price and there's a sale price. There's a sale price at the farm end and there is a sale price at the regulated market end, because the goods come to the regulated market, the commodity comes to the regulated market price end. But I assume since government is a buyer and there's a minimum support price, the price at the regulated market end should be same or similar. Why there was a difference? Because the farmers didn't have that information, right? ITC, if you have seen popularly, Professor Agrawal from IIT Chennai, he worked with ITC and he created ITC E-Chaupal. Chaupal is a place where people will go sit and gossip. He did that part, right? E-Chaupal. So E-Chaupal is essentially a place where there's a computer, somebody comes and he discovers the price. So essential objective of killing information asymmetry is price discovery. So the task that was given to me is to network all these mandis, wheat mandis which are there, and then try to see that everybody discovers what is the right kind of price or what is the minimum support price which is available in this marketplace. Technology helps in a great way. I'll give you an example. This is a very interesting example that happens in Kerala, right? What happens in Kerala is that there are certain places where these fishermen, they go to the deep sea fishing. So when they come back from the deep sea fishing, obviously they will land up in a place which is closer to their house. But when they bring back their fish to that locality, since many of the fishermen bring the fish, that means the demand, the supply is very high and the demand is distributed because it has to be taken to the marketplace and sold in the marketplace. They normally get a poorer price because they don't know what is the real market price, because they sell at the farm end or they sell at the beach end, the sea beach end there. Because of mobile phone technology, today whenever they do a catch inside the deep sea, and whenever they get a signal, maybe half a kilometer before they land up on the land, they will go and contact different kind of vendors at different points of time, right? They'll contact different kind of markets. And instead of coming back to the same place where they were coming for centuries, they would like to change the direction of their boats. And they would like to go back to the places where they get a better price. So you can see how mobile technology or a mobile app helps people to kill the idea of information asymmetry and helps people to discover the price. What are the implications of that? It is not too disjointed phenomenon, right? You can't say that information asymmetry as well as when you look at market functionality are disjointed phenomenon. Information asymmetry also solves the same problem. Information asymmetry is also solving the same problem that we talked about. What is this problem? This problem of market dysfunctionality. It also solves the market dysfunctionality problem. So they are together. Market dysfunctionality, information asymmetry work together. Now, if you go back and look at the developed markets, like the explanations I had given you at the beginning part of it, in the developed markets like US or in Europe, you will find out both of them are not there, Neither there is huge amount of information asymmetry, nor there is huge amount of market dysfunctionality in the marketplace. If you go to an extreme case which China is exploiting in Africa on commodity pricing by investing in roads and buildings infrastructures, and then taking over all the raw materials for consumption and redistribution across the globe because of their global supply chain management practices, you'll find out information asymmetry is highest, right? So an entrepreneur comes in between and solves these problems, right? Now, what are the sources of these kind of problems which are there and how we can solve it? Let us move to the third part of our conversation. The third part of our conversation is about this dysfunctionality, this information asymmetry exists. The region of this dysfunctional information asymmetry existing in the business place is sheerly because there are institutional voids. There are non-existence of institutions to support your business. Entrepreneurship is being impacted by non-availability of these institutional voids. I will draw your attention to three institutional voids. The number one is called product void. The second one is called market void. And the third one is called capital void. So product void, labor market void, and capital void. These three things we have to talk about. Today's discussion is more about that part of it. Now I'm pretty sure many of you know what is called BIS, Bureau of Indian Standard. I know many of you know called ISI, Indian Standard Institute. But I'm sure 90% of you listening to me never buy a product by looking at whether it is ISI mark or it is a BIS mark. What you look at is the brand. If the brand is Tata, if the brand is Birla, if the brand is Jindal, if the brand is Reliance, you will go and buy those brands. So the corporate brands play a major role because institutions that certify the quality levels of a product don't exist in market like India, right? This is one of the institutional voids that you find there, right? Maybe when you buy gold, you'll go back and look at the BIS standards, but I'm pretty sure not many of you will go today because of the food related issues. People are looking at FSSAI certifications, and today, of course, you cannot really go and legally market foods without that FSSAI certification there. There are institutions. I agree with you, Jay, that there are institutions, but they're weaker institutions, and they don't become a criteria for quality in the country that we have got there. The consciousness is building up. These kind of institutions are building up, but globally there are. If you look back to the US market, whether it is FTC, whether it is HTC, all of them play a great role in identifying what are the quality standards that should be delivered to the consumers there. Even you have European norms also. When you're exporting something, you also look at and you get European norms in that case. So there is a void, product void, whereby an entrepreneur can go back and say that I will take my product to X place and get certified that my product is good, and then bring it to the market, and customers are going to buy my products there. You can bring out pharmaceuticals because they are regulated market. You can bring out education, they are regulated market. In those kind of markets, there are institutions exist, but I understand what AICT plays as a role, being that kind of a quality inspector. Everybody knows about that part of it, right? So market dysfunctionality and information asymmetry comes into picture because there are institutional voids, so that these institutional voids do not stand for quality in the marketplace there. If you have to draw a parallel, you can go back and see how many kind of people die out of using spurious products in our country, whether it is spurious liquor, spurious medicines, how many of them really go and buy that part. I did a project on suburban areas of metros. So I looked at the metro cities and took 70 kilometers around the metro cities, and I tried to study what exactly in these metro cities, how many of cloning brands are available there. So we studied those kind of cloning brands and identified those cloners. For example, I could identify 72 types of Fair and Lovely available around Indore. Yeah, same kind of packaging, same kind of smell, but not manufactured by Unilever, but 72 types of them are available in the marketplace. So somebody is taking advantage of gaps in distribution channel and taking the advantage of that to create a cloning brand and make it available in the marketplace. That's the point that I wanted to drive to in that case. This is the first kind of point. And for a good marketplace, if there are labs where the products can be tested and they can be certified as good quality products, then our reliance on branding, advertising, corporate brands will be lesser. In that case, they will be lesser for us. That's the first point that I wanted to drive into all of you. Just give me a second. There's a call. I'll take the call. Hello. Yeah. हाँ बोलो. हाँ. अरे भाई बाजू में है, बिग बाजार है ना, उसके साइड में है, बिग बाजार के बाजू, नेक्स्ट टू बिग बाजार है. Just give me a minute. I will come back. Sorry, since I'm in office and talking to you from office, I have to just make these kind of small things there. So the first one is what I have spoken about, the institutional voids in that product institutional void there. The second category of voids are called labor market voids. You understand that labor reforms is a key activity for growth of a nation, growth and modernization of industry, but how India suffers because of colonial labor legislations which are there. So labor market void doesn't only talk about labor legislation, it talks about also quality institutions which will produce the manpower. Some of you are responsible for this. So if Tata needs good quality of manpower, Tata has to create Tata Administrative Service. If Birla needs manpower, they have to create BITS Pilani, right? Because they don't trust on the existing systems for students. So you find out there is a labor market void in terms of institutions that can give you skilled labor, institutions that can give you quality manpower, whether managerial or non-managerial levels. But these are the places where you'll find out there are labor market voids. We'll come to the third one. I didn't want to spend much time on the labor market void because third one is most important one. It's called capital market void. The strength of your capital market indicates how stronger is your economy. So for that, you have to look at the size of your capital market and divide your capital market with your GDP and can find out what percentage of your GDP is linked to your capital market. You understand what I mean by capital market. I'm talking about stock markets, right? So an entrepreneur needs money. So he needs funds to start his business. Some fund he brings is in called equity capital, which is his own capital. But for his business, he's also looking at debt capital, which can be loan, or he's looking for further investments from other investors, right? The other investors can be angel investors, private equity investors, or institutional investors, right? So for that, there is a big struggle in the Indian context. Our entrepreneurial ecosystem is not that strong like US ecosystem or UK ecosystem there. Anyways, if you go back, if you have a great business idea, you work onto an investor and he trusts in your investment, you'll get plenty of money coming to you. But that doesn't happen in India. You have to struggle hard to generate resources, not only for you as an individual entrepreneur, for organization also. I can give you example. Tata is supposed to run factories for producing steel, hotels for producing services, and also for all other business or to create software through TCS. But they also need capital. So they have to support their ventures by creating something called Tata Capital. They are into the business of doing something else, but they have to enter into the business of generating resources from the marketplace for investments. So Tata Capital is being created. So Reliance Capital is being created. So Birla Mutual Fund is being created. So these institutions, or for that matter, any entrepreneur, when he is looking for access to capital, you do not have that kind of an access to the capital in that way, whether it is equity capital or it is a debt capital. If you ever send your student to a bank, to a public sector bank, and ask your student what kind of experience he got when he presented his business plan. You will get what kind of concept that I'm talking about, or what experience I'm talking about. It's so difficult to get debt capital because they'll ask the guarantee for your land or collateral security before they give you that part. In Western world, that doesn't happen. There are institutions which are to support your initiatives that you do there. So access to capital or capital market void is the third capital market void. And this creates a business opportunity. This creates a new generation of entrepreneurs who are focusing something called fintech. So there are fintech companies, those who are there. Some of the fintech companies which have been created here are into tertiary loan arrangements. I'll give you an example of that. Today, when you look at pandemic situation, a lot of parents have lost their jobs. They do not have money to sponsor their children, the education of their children. Schools are being closed. So a lot of school owners are pressing hard for fees. When it comes to paying fees for higher education, banks give loan, engineering course, management course, you can get a loan. When you go to a bank and ask for a loan for a school education, banks will not give you loan for school education. They don't give you that part. So here is a void where a person who lost a job and his capability to pay back is limited, goes to a bank for funding, he doesn't get the funding there. Now here comes a business model. The business model by fintech companies is actually a subvention model. So they go back to the school owner and they tell the school owner that they're willing to sponsor the fees of a child, they're willing to sponsor on that part. Yeah, I'll finish this and come for the lunch. So they're willing to sponsor the child, subject to the condition that the interest is being paid by the school. This is a subvention model. So many schools, because they're not getting the fees and agreeing to this, that they are going to pay the interest and the parents are going to pay the capital part of it. Some of the parents have gone to the bank in the context of some other loans and they have collected those loans under some other context and using that fee for the children there. Here comes a fintech company that links this kind of school owners and parents and creates a business model and makes profit out of it. So the third kind of void is a capital market void. So you look up to this capital market so that you can expand your business. You need capital to set up your business. You need capital to expand your business. And you need also capital to grow your business where entering into another market. Let me take a pause here now and take up some questions from you that you have got so far. If you have got any questions and you would like to ask me those questions, you can chat and put your questions. If you have any questions so far on the institutional voids, the three kind of voids that I talked about, product market void, labor market void, and capital market void, I can answer those questions at this point of time. Or if you have a point that you would like to explain to your colleagues who are listening to you, you can put it here. I hope you are typing your questions. Whereas I'll start asking questions. Chetan is asking a question: how to overcome capital crunch in pandemic? Capital crunch for what? You need money for two things. You need money for productive usage and you need money for non-productive usage. If you look at a farmer's large part of capital requirement is non-productive in character. He has to have festivals, he has to attend a marriage party. So all these are where he is looking it for their own expenditure. These are non-productive capital that he needs. So he goes back. Oh, how do I do that? I have to make Himanshu as the host. Okay. Okay, Himanshu, I have made you the host. So if it is a capital crunch for productive usage, we can go back, and Government of India has done some schemes. You can go back if you are registered as a small and medium enterprise. You can go back and you can take an interest-free loan. It is available there. But if it is for non-productive, so it's for non-productive consumption, then obviously you have to depend on your personal loans. Either you borrow from somebody or borrow from the bank for your personal consumption. I don't think the scope of my conversations is about how to get loans for personal consumption. It's more about how to run your business or how to start a business. How to start a business, there is no challenge in that case. You have startup capitals available. Um, what is the difference between angel investor and venture capitalist? I think the angel investor comes at the early stage of your business there. An angel investor is not only someone who just gives you money for your business. He does a lot of angel work also. There are a couple of angels I can talk about that part. So you have got angel networks. You have got Mumbai Angels. You have got Chennai Angels, and you have got India Angel Network. I'm a part of IAN, India Angel Network. So if you go back and look at a search, you can Google about them, Mumbai Angels, or Chennai Angels, or India Angel Network. You'll find out successful business people like some point of time. My boss was Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, who brought me into this part of it. So, these are the people who come there and they use their experience, they give their network, and they provide you market access, they provide you distribution access. That is more than just giving capital to you. For example, if you want to scale up a business and you go back to Hero Motors, and let's say you are making belts or jackets or something, and you want to partner with Hero Motors, you know that they have 6,000 points of presence in the India in the form of distributors, and they can become an angel investor for you. You can piggyback on their distribution channel, and you can sell your products into the marketplace there. Right. So this is something which is doable in that case. A venture capitalist has got an ROI model in the mind, and he will come and invest, and then he will be looking at returns. Sometimes I call them as vultures. There's a popular book called Vultures at the Gate. This is an Abisco's takeover case. It's a part of the new venture planning course also. So they are heartless people. Angel investors are not that. Angel investors will help you to grow in the business there. So they're like mentors for you. They give their network. Other than giving money, they also give their network to that part. Divya is asking, when is it right time for startups to look for franchising more for expansion purpose? You can expand market in multiple ways. One of the way of expanding your market is through franchising. But for franchising, that the franchisees would find some value in the brand. If there is no value in the brand, probably there is no franchise involved in that case. There are other ways you can do. You can have your direct sales force. You can have network marketing. You can appoint your distributors, dealers, and wholesalers, do indirect marketing. These are some of the ways by which you can expand your business within a particular business model that you look at. Rachna is asking, is there any impact of gender on developing entrepreneurs? Actually, traditionally, it is believed that male people are supposed to be entrepreneurs, and women folk are more into providing services. But if you look back to some of the successful entrepreneurs in generation just before me and the generations following me, I don't think gender is playing a great role in terms of whether you want to be a good entrepreneur or not. Uh, in small and medium enterprises, I have seen and mentored some of very successful women entrepreneurs who have made their business big. I don't believe in the idea of gender playing a role for entrepreneurial success in that case. Today, government gives more opportunity to the female. I was working with Apicol, which does agricultural business financing. They do business modeling for agricultural finance. I think the subsidies which government pays to a male entrepreneur is 40% on capex, and to the woman it is 50% on capex. So in that case, probably gender is positively skewed towards female folk, whereby they get a larger subsidy for doing that part. So that is otherwise I don't think gender has a role to play. If you look at entrepreneurial intent, because of the culturally we are such that we always try to protect the women folk there, and there's a patriarchal system not only in the film industry but also in the entrepreneurial culture there. But it has been broken. That windshield is being broken. That glass door is broken. You find that more and more women entrepreneurs at this point of time they coming there. So Rachna, I hope I have answered your question affirmatively towards female entrepreneurs doing better and more opportunities and subsidies for female entrepreneurs there. Is there any relationship between asymmetry and corruption? Yes, corruption is a part of the system, and one of the sources of information asymmetry is corruption. But there's an intent of providing the information. The intent of the providing information is sometimes restricted, and a opaque layer is created, and corruption takes birth into that process. I have a theory that says that if technology is being used for decision making in the public system, the corruption will be lesser. For example, if a file moves from one junior officer to the next officer, the junior officer has got the ability to keep the physical file for a longer period of time and then ask for money. But if you're using technology and you are programmed in such a way that the junior officer has to take a call within 2 to 3 year period of time, 2 to 3 days period of time, in that case, it automatically moves to the next levels. I think the chances of corruption will be lower. I am a very strong believer that corruption can be reduced and transparency can be used by using technology there. The world towards entrepreneurship is changing. Can you use? I think a technology era per se, because there is Industry 4.0. So obviously the technology era has come. But what kind of technology? You look at artificial intelligence. You look at how exactly you can go and read things through machine learning, and how you can use robotics. The direction is towards that. So that is why it will be a technology-enabled environment. E-commerce has been very successful, but we are looking for the next level of innovations and revolutions there. So you have Industry 1.0, Industry 2.0, Industry 3.0. Now we are into Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 will be more technology enabled because scaling up happens. I suggest that you search a word called growth hacking and read about growth hacking or how to become a growth hacker. So if you can read that part, you can see how technology is being used for growth hacking business. Northeastern region for tourism and hospitality business. I think why exactly we look for soft loan? If you have a stronger business proposition, and by using technology you can reach at a larger audience, I think it is possible that you can make your business national. If you are making something very small, confined to a particular area, then you should look at the regional variation in that case. If you have to promote Manipur, why Manipur should be promoted within the northeastern states? Why not across the country? Today you have got Airbnb, you have got Oyo, you have got 22 OTAs, and these online travel agencies can go and promote your brand across the nation. So why exactly to say that you will be doing local consumption, local demand, and local consumption? That's not the kind of thing that you can look at. Yes, I agree with you. There can be crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is a really good alternative for capital crunch in the light of pandemic. But if everybody has got a capital crunch, how exactly you go and handle crowdfunding is a question in that case. But crowdfunding works. It works in some areas. It works there. Role of social entrepreneurship and income generation through tourism and hospitality business. I think if you see PPP, public-private partnership models, and ecotourism, they work together. Rural tourism, ecotourism, and public-private partnership are something whereby it builds social entrepreneurship by community development. I suggest that when you look at ecotourism and rural tourism, what you need to understand is what is called fragile innovation. So there are 3 dimensions to fragile innovation. On one side of the innovation is technology. Obviously, you'll be looking at technology. Other side is the institutional innovations. A PPP is an example of institutional innovations, which is mostly applicable in the case of tourism and rural tourism. And the other side is the community involvement. So a PPP model typically has got public-private partnership. So the public is defined as government here. But for a fragile innovation model, then there is something called community development. So community modeling is done. So forest tourism, jungle tourism, ecotourism, rural tourism, these are all a combination of these 3. Whereas the institutional framework gives you structural support, The technology provides you access to the market for distribution of your information and transactions by bringing customers to you. A community built around your hospitality business, tourism and hospitality business integrates this as a part of the system where the response and the experience of the traveler is far better than what you can do in that case. So I think this is how the modeling has to be done in that case. Do you think that post-COVID will be an entrepreneurship era and it is more beneficial for India as Atmanirbhar Bharat, as most of the professionals lost their job in this pandemic? I think entrepreneurship is sometimes situational, but it is more to be self-driven in that case. Self-driven exercise there. Entrepreneur era is more beneficial for India, yes, obviously, because we cannot really create those number of jobs for people in India there. So if you look at Japan, 98% people are skilled. If you look at India, only 7% people are skilled. What kind of jobs do you create for unskilled people? They can either work in agriculture, which is predominantly a large source of employment, or they'll become a contractor and migratory worker, where they'll be working in the construction industry. Unskilled workers do not have really great opportunity from an employment point of view. So it is natural for somebody to reskill that. That's why there are a lot of reskilling and skilling business opportunities in terms of vocational training institutions, so that you create workforce in that case. I am not carried away by this Atmanirbhar Digital India. Please don't give me those things there. If there is market dysfunctionality, information asymmetry, you are positively motivated, naturally there will be an opportunity for you to work on. Technology, non-technology, hospitality, community-based, institutional-based is a different framework which you can do it. That's a different story that you work out in that case, right? Coming 2 to 5 years in India in lieu of current global context, I think what is going to happen in a post-pandemic world is very important for us to understand. So what is going to happen in the post-pandemic world is called contactless economy. So you will have a large part of the economy which will be contactless economy, number one. Second part, prior to pandemic also, there was an anti-globalization phenomenon. A lot of people came to power, became prime minister and presidents because they had aggressive nationalism and they talked about domestic consumption, domestic markets. American president is one of them, Indian prime minister is one of those people there. So there will be a lot of domesticated business than the global business. Because of the pandemic, it is going to come. So in tourism and hospitality sector, you expect a lot of these people who are traveling abroad for holidaying will not travel. So they'll be looking for opportunity within the domestic sector. So the domestic tourism industry is going to be stronger in the future period of time. This is the second trend, domestic consumption. First one is contactless economy. Second one is domestic demand and domestic supply. So domestic consumption is going to happen there. Third one, the structure of the hospitality industry is surely undergoing to a big change. What does that mean? If you look back to the hotels, people would like to prefer to go and live in a hotel which is a 5-star, which has got 500 rooms, and you have got banquet halls, you have got dance bars. This is not going to happen. Prior to this also, over the last 10 to 15 years, there's a back to nature phenomenon which has come there. If you're reading about how the consumer meanings are changing in India, back to nature, Patanjali is one of the successful stories of back to nature. So back to nature is a phenomenon there. So now people will prefer to travel to places where less number of crowd is there. I wrote a piece a couple of days before on this. So less number of people will be in those areas, and they'll prefer to look at hotels and hospitality services where fewer number of people are there. So that indicates that small and medium enterprises in hospitality sector are going to grow more compared to the large institutional frameworks like Taj hotels or larger hotels there, because people will try to avoid the contact that they are likely to have in that case. The other part, the philosophy part of it is that this 5-6 months of confinement has made people to rethink about their life and the frugality of their life. So there will be a faster rate of people to move into the nature or get reconnected with the nature there. If that happens, then obviously you'll find out ecotourism sector, hospitality sector, and rural tourism sector are likely to grow, and people would like to experience that part of it. So I will not like to classify them into different things. I like to take them as experience tourism. So more and more kind of experience tourism is going to come into the picture there. So I expect a million number of entrepreneurs located in different places trying to build the experiences using technology quite a lot, providing that kind of virtual experience and driving traffic to these places there. We call this phenomenon as LED, local economic development. So local economic development is now breaking up large manufacturing facility to smaller one, breaking large hospitality sector into smaller sectors there, and that is where the opportunity will come there. So if you are an intelligent person, you can really buy small units of land or place on 3 or 4 destinations and create a chain and provide unit of experience, the similar kind of experience to your traveler across these places. You are going to be a successful business model because these 22 OTAs which are available, they're going to take your customers. I have been talking to hospitality and tourism people, and I'm finding out what kind of orders, as far as destinations are concerned, as far as hospitalities are concerned, they are getting these kind of bookings they are finding out. So treehouse, homestay, Airbnb are going to the reality of the life. Online education is going to the reality of the life. So please try to teach your students. There are finally 2 things that I like to talk about. One is called economy of scale, other is called economy of scope. So in your hospitality and tourism business, if you can really educate your students to look at economy of scale, like the network that I talked about, and economy of scope where local area demand can be created, local economic development can be created, then if they come together, then you will be able to create a bunch of very successful entrepreneurs. I would like to thank all of you for the time that you have given me and the interactions that you have done with me. And I also like to thank the host, Himanshu, for inviting me to speak to you and throw some light into exactly how an entrepreneurship is being built and how we can create that part. Himanshu, now I am passing it on to you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I am very much thankful and obliged for your kind acceptance of our invitation to deliver such an insightful, informative, and guiding lecture in entrepreneurship and startup opportunities in India, and so nicely answered all the questions raised by the participants. Today, I feel proud being the coordinator for this AICT Hotel FDP, particularly for this session, sir. You make me proud. Once again, on behalf of Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management, Mizoram University, thanking you, sir, for your valuable time as well as apex level of lecture. Thank you, sir. Namaste.